4, 3, 2.
Perspectives with Asima Silva, and today we're going to be speaking with immigration attorney Randy Feldman. And of course, as always, we were recorded right here in the heart of Worcester at WCCA TV, and you can watch Perspectives with Asima Silva on channel 194. So Randy Feldman is a name that is probably familiar to many of you, is a noted immigration attorney. He is also the individual who kicked off the rally recently when it came to hundreds of people in the Worcester area, Americans who came together and were very concerned about the images that they have seen from our southern border, right, and what is happening down there and what is happening with these children and the concerns that children have been taken from their families and at the time perhaps never to be reunited with them.
I remember seeing, first of all, thank you, Randy, for joining us today, especially on this topic that's pretty much in the news constantly. And I think this topic has been in the news for, several months now. I remember earlier this year starting off with families, parents being ripped apart from their children, parents being deported, seeing images of, family members who've been here for 30 years in this country being boarded on planes and sent back to, quote unquote, their home country, which they don't even recognize anymore. And now we're seeing in recent times children in cages. Can you give us a little bit about what is going on and then share some of your opinions on what do you think is going to be happening?
Yeah, I'd love to. I also want to mention that two rallies combined together. The impetus for the rally was just what we're about to talk to, right? And then when the Supreme Court decision came down, having the indefinite ban on predominantly Muslim countries plus two others, the Muslim community was also going to have its own protest, and we combined forces. So it was really a very, very great rally that we handled both issues and everybody came together. It was very significant. And, we really said, we are all children today. We are all Muslims today. Like, it was a really wonderful, special moment. But on what's going on the border, to be honest with you, it is a problem what's going on the border. It is a problem. You can't just have an open border where people just come in. It's a problem. However, it's a bigger problem the way that Donald Trump is trying to address the real problem. Right? It's just cruel and mean and degrading the way that he's trying to address it. I actually think the way to address it would be like when the Soviet Union fell and both Jewish people and evangelical Protestants who had been had a history of discrimination against them wanted to come here, there was a certain numbers of people who could come as refugees. And then when there was not enough refugee, when the slots were all taken, the people were allowed to be paroled into the United States who didn't meet the refugee standard or the cap had been reached. And a bunch of Jewish groups got together and said, we will pay the 7 years of the benefits for the people to get resettled. That would actually be, that kind of system would be what makes sense to me in Central America. Because the people generally mostly can't meet the definition of being a refugee or getting asylum. Because you have to show you have to show that you're persecuted. And persecuted does not mean I'm a victim of crime, although it could mean I'm a victim of domestic violence. The law had become much more understanding of the classification, the social group of women who suffer from domestic violence, and had moved towards that, but it had never moved towards gang violence as being a reason to give somebody political protection. Because of the reason that if someone from Chicago, South Side, went to France or England and say, I want to apply for asylum because the crime is terrible, they'd say, like, it's not about crime. It's about your political beliefs or your social group. So what the administration did is they said, we're not going to let any more claims on gang violence be heard and granted, and even domestic violence, we're not going to look at that as a social group anymore. We're not going to give asylum for those things. So once they say that, because they can say that, they're almost thumbing their face in their nose in the eye of international law who's trying to move towards those standards, especially with domestic violence for women. So if that's going to be the case, it seems to me that the better way to do this would be to set up in those three countries a place where the UN and the US together could offer either refugee status, if you would meet the definition, and if not, how bad is your life, because we might parole you into the United States if you're facing like the kind of violence that's just horrific, but we can't call it asylum or a refugee situation. So there's ways, and then here in the U.S. there's also ways that you can have the people stay together to have some sort of adjudication on their case together, or there's a lot of humane things that could be done where you still insist that there is a border and we still have the rule of law. It's just that the Trump administration stopped doing some of those things because the Obama administration was doing it, and whatever the Obama administration does had to be wrong in the Trump administration's eyes. And they just did so much, I don't want to say overkill because they didn't kill anybody, but I don't use that euphemism, but it was just so heartless the way that they handled this whole thing.
And it seems to me that that's what a lot of the rally was about. Even the way that you just set this up, Randy, going, well, of course, nobody is saying open borders. And yet, the people who attended that rally and the pictures from that rally on social media, people who attended that rally that were vilified for, look at these people who want open borders, don't they realize that Obama did the same thing? What you just said to me seems as if there should be an ability to have a conversation and to be able to come also to maybe some sort of a compromise about what we want. People don't want to see images of young people in cages, and that is what those images showed, or of somebody being taken from their family, as the courts have said, now you must reunite them. And yet somehow it has become this incredible partisan issue that if you support the president, or even I think that if you are a conservative of the right, that somehow you have to say, well, that's just the rule of law, or again, what I kept seeing goes against what you said. You were the first person who spoke at that rally. And I feel that what you're saying is not the way that it's being portrayed by a lot of people who probably didn't go to the rally, but we are so entrenched in this divide in America that they've already decided that everybody who attended must be for open borders and no rule of law.
The same is also true on the travel ban. The same exact thing. What the Supreme Court said on the travel ban on a 5-4 decision was that we will hold our nose and we will ignore everything Donald Trump said when he was running for office and after he became president. We will not say that that influences us what the intent of the ban is. Right. And we will say, because sovereignty of the nation is something the executive branch does have more power than in other things under our Constitution. And Korea and Venezuela were added to the ban. It wasn't just predominantly Muslim countries. We will ignore all the statements that President Trump made, which were, it's a Muslim ban, right? And we will ignore that. And we will just say, under the law, if you take it at its face, as it's argued before the court, and you ignore the president's statements, we will say that it is just simply the executive branch's right to make a decision on, is there the kind of potential threat that they can identify under the laws of the United States.
Well, you look overseas right now where thousands of people took to the streets of London in protest of Donald Trump because of his statements. I mean, it was this immediate reaction because of his statements about Germany, England have destroyed their countries. Who they are at their national identities by who they have let in. And it was immediately apparent that what he meant was anybody who is not white European, Western European.
And Christian.
And that's right.
Well,
and
maybe
that's
Jewish.
What, yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it was,
what he meant.
I mean, I don't play the racist card too easily, and my girlfriend is black, and she sees things in racial terms, and I don't go there that much. I don't know how else you can see that but racism, what Donald Trump said about the Western European civilizations not wanting integration or letting 5 to 10%. I mean, look at the amount of people from Turkey that went to Germany over the last 50, 40 years, right? And how well they've incorporated themselves and how productive they are and how wonderful contributions they've made to Germany as Turks, right? Who have assimilated into their society. And a nation of immigrants like ours, how could our president say, how do you let these people into your country and let them dilute your culture? I mean.
I just find it funny that his wife being an immigrant, he says those things.
Yeah, it just honestly, his wife is a white European immigrant, and I think that that's the distinction
exception.
for him. You know, he just thinks people of color and their cultures that are non-European are not the same or inferior to white European culture. I honestly believe after that statement that he made yesterday, it's hard for me to come to any other conclusion than he actually thinks in the superiority of Western European thought, which is what we are born from as well, right? He just thinks that that's the most superior thought there is, and how would anybody ever want to dilute that? And you just can't imagine that an American could say that. You can't imagine that anyone would think that all the different people that contribute so much to the U.S. Don't make the place greater.
Right.
How does an American, how do you not see that? It's just beyond me how anyone could say
Yeah,
that.
and the leaders in Europe obviously have come out and said that. Theresa May, has, but it was amazing to me, this immediate reaction to people seeing them in another country, in London, in England, one of our great allies, and homemade signs and banners of thousands of people taking to the streets in opposition to what an American president had to say in their country. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that. On the day that he was meeting with the Queen.
It's beyond politics. It's culture. It's humanity. Right. It's about our humanity, and it's a challenge to any kind of global, worldwide humanity. It's like, no, these distinctions are so significant that they have to be defended, instead of like, can't we all get along, and aren't we all part of the same world? It's the exact opposite point of view, and you almost never see it expressed, period, but certainly outside of fringe right-wing elements.
I guess that brings us back to our southern border. So what is happening? Where do we go from?
We're back to the Obama policy. We're back to catch and release, because there simply are not the resources to be able to hold everybody. And also, there's a decision, the Flores decision, as a federal court during the Bush era, came to an accommodation. And the accommodation was, you can't hold children, right? You have to let children go after 20 days. So if somebody comes with a child, that person can't be held for more than 20 days. And even if Obama, to try to get some control of what was going on, tried to have some sort of place where families would be held together, and then the asylum case would be expeditiously held. I mean, Donald Trump has even refused to hire more immigration judges to hold expeditious asylum hearings. But even then, you'd have to get it done within 20 days under this law, or you'd have to pass a new law. Now, the Democrats would play ball and pass a new law if it was a fair law.
Right.
But the Trump administration wants everything to go its way to help just 1.8 million of the 11 million that don't have papers. He goes, we want everything. We want to stop chain or family migration. We don't want the lottery. We want, everyone to have their documents checked by every employer. We want more border patrol. There's more border patrol. And the Democrats were saying, okay, we'll make a deal. But the 11 million people that have been here, let's say 9 million of them have come before 2014, you have to have a legalization process where people prove that they can speak English, pay back taxes, and get right with the law. And Donald Trump was like, no, that was the last deal that was going to be made. My deal is I'll do it, but not for like 9 million. I'll do that same deal for 1.8 million. And in that way, the Democrats will never pass a new law where the Flores decision goes away and families are held as family units while speedy adjudications are made on their asylum claim. They're not going to get rid of that agreement made originally with the Trump and then the Clinton administration under Flores, where you can't hold unaccompanied minors, and the judge interpreted that to be minors at all, not just unaccompanied. All minors can't be held. So if you come with your family, after 20 days, you'll have to be released. So we're at the same place as we were with the Obama administration.
Well, can you explain all those images that I've seen where they have 1-year-old and 4-year-olds appear in front of an immigration judge? Like, I don't understand a ruling or a law that would ever think that a child will be able to represent themselves and understand and show up in court. I cannot imagine a 1-year-old sitting or behaving or even understanding what's going on. It just seems absurd that there might be a law that allows this. can you please explain what is going on and why is this happening?
Well, yeah, the American UNICEF is actually hiring lawyers. My brother's a real estate lawyer. Not hiring, I'm sorry. They're getting volunteer lawyers from all over the country to go down there and represent those children as like guardian ad litems, to represent their point of view in an immigration context, with meaning in a deportation hearing, right? And so the absurdity of that, because their family is not there. Normally, when we represent a parent, the dependent children are a part of the process. And then the judge will say, well, you don't have to bring, if the child's in school or very young, it will be disruptive. Don't bother bringing the child to court. We will waive their presence. And whatever happens to the adult, we're going to have that happen to the child. But the child doesn't have to stand in their own defense because they're coming as a family unit. But when you break apart the family unit, then who will represent the child? So guardian ad litems end up to be the people who do that. And UNICEF, USA, is trying to get all these volunteer lawyers from all over the countries. I tried to go down and volunteer on the border, and my Association of Immigration Lawyers said, we're full. So many people have volunteered. See us in September. Maybe we'll have an opening then. So, the legal community is very energized with the inhumanity of the Trump administration's approach.
I just want to pick up on that for a moment, just the politics of it, and what both of you feel. And Asma, so many times, of course, the program will focus on things that are happening here in the United States with different communities. Do you feel that still there is this energy? Do we have sort of this wave that is coming, this democratic wave, or is the energy equal on the other side? When you just said that the immigration lawyers, the law community has been energized so much so that you wanted to volunteer and there wasn't a spot for you, that to me, anecdotal evidence or not, seems to say that there's a lot of people who want to get out there and are part of the,
Right.
I guess, hashtag resistance, if you will.
Right. My biggest fear, though, just weighing in my opinion on what's going on, is with every couple of months there's a new incident that we're just surprised at and alarmed at. And I fear that we're going to become numb. And yes, we're energized now, but in a month we're going to look for that next new thing to just move on to. And I'm hoping that energy still sustains and we don't lose it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because my feeling, even with the images that I saw over in England, I guess, which is why I was kind of struck by these thousands of people in the streets of London who are protesting an American president, is when I look at some of the poll numbers or I start to read things, I also start to think, here in America, have we just, after a couple of years, are we just accepting? Are we beginning to think this is the way it is? Are we beginning to say, well, this is the way that someone should act? All the things that attracted people to Donald Trump while he was campaigning. Well, he's plain spoken. Whether I agree or not, at least he's putting the issue out there. He's saying what needs to be said when it comes to a variety of issues. Is Donald Trump, I mean, here we're all speaking as if we're horrified at the way in which he represents America, the ugly American going overseas. And yet, is he actually winning this battle that we are going to accept that that's the way that a president should behave?
I don't think so. I actually think that 55% of the nation is as inspired to resist Donald Trump as the Tea Party was to resist Barack Obama. Only the Tea Party was probably like 30% of the country, right, or something maybe a little less. Let's call the Trump supporters 35% of the country. I don't think 35%, I think more than 35% want to resist what's going on. Because I think young people, this is not the America they want. Women, this is not the America they want. Certainly people of color and liberal people, this is certainly not the America that they want, right? But when you add up all the groups who just say, this is not the America that we want, it's much more than liberal-minded people, right? There's a certain group in the middle that have had it. Like, with this is their president, this is how we're represented as a country. I think even if you said that it's 35-35 and 30% in the middle, even the most generous interpretation of it, that 30%, I would think at least 20 to 30% of it is just moving towards the resistance. They're really just, I can't believe this person. In fact, I have good friends who are conservative, and I respect their points of view, and most of them are moved away from supporting Donald Trump. They can't believe that this is it. And I feel sorry for them because the conservative movement is going to take it on the chin because the advocate and leader of the conservative ideology is a buffoon. So the conservative movement, and some of those people are very respectable, their leader is doing a disservice to their conservative values and ideals. So I think the resistance is going to be big. I don't think it's going to be small.
When it comes to Donald Trump and immigration, the fact that he now has 2 Supreme Court picks, who knows, maybe there will even be a third. How could that conservative court for the next 2-3 decades, these are young men that he has, in their 50s, that he has now placed on the Supreme Court, how could that affect some of what we've seen when it comes to immigration or what's happening on our border?
They would be more security-minded than freedom-minded, I think it's safe to say. So they would probably be more deferential also to the executive branch and executive power and authority. And sometimes that helps immigration, and sometimes it hurts. Barack Obama told the state of Arizona, we'll go to court to stop you from asking people for their papers, their immigration papers, when you pull them over. And the court said, mostly, that the executive, the federal government, has a right to tell a state, you can't be enforcing immigration laws. So it's, right now we have Donald Trump, so right now you might think, well, the executive is very anti-immigrant. But sometimes the executive will be pro-immigrant. Courts are not supposed to be outcome determinative. They're not supposed to look at, well, who's the president? What's the end result of the policy? They're supposed to say, what authority does the Constitution grant to the executive? So they would probably be, a conservative court would probably give more authority to the president. This president may be conservative, the next president might not be. So how this affects immigration, is hard to, is unknown, but I would not think that automatically it will be anti-immigrant. It will be with this president. We don't know how long this person will be our president, but it may not, in the end, necessarily be anti-president. If Merrick Garland was put as the 5th person on the court, we would have had DACA for their parents. DAPA, those 5 million parents who came and have been here since 2012 would have been able to get work cards like their children if Merrick Garland was placed on the Supreme Court, right? So it all matters who's the executive, really, more than anything else.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, just a side note of some of the conversations we had. I was actually in a conversation with a friend, and statistically, during the election, 7% of Muslims did vote for Trump. And partly for whatever reasons, like many other Republicans, they voted because they didn't believe everything he was saying. They believed in change. They liked certain policies he was, talking about. But it was just funny because recently this friend of mine said, I am more likely to introduce myself as a Muslim to a stranger than to them as a Republican. and this shocked me because that's like choosing between apples and oranges, and they're both fruit, and you don't know which one you're going to present first, right? But she said she was more comfortable being known as a Muslim than a Republican. Do you feel that that's what's happening with our country right now? You're either on this camp or this camp. You're either on the immigration or you're not, and there's nothing in the middle. Kind of what Hank was saying before about there needs to be a conversation that happens in this country because we're kind of becoming polarized. And of course, I'm on the younger side, but I don't remember this. And I remember one of my older teachers in elementary school, talking about how politics back in the day had split families. You couldn't have a Democrat sitting on a Republican table at dinner table. It was almost like as if it was breaking apart families in terms of political opinions. Are we going to be going back to that, you think?
Yeah, that's why I think that people are going to be energized. Because, for the longest time, probably since the 1960s, maybe during the Reagan Revolution, people weren't very political. People just live their own daily lives.
That's exactly what I said. I don't even remember if Reagan was Democrat or Republican. It's exactly what I said, because
Yeah.
it was not even a conversation.
Right. Before that, after that, everybody just went to their daily life and do their life and don't really pay a lot of attention to politics. I think after Donald Trump got elected, for the first time since Reagan or since the 60s, people decided to become political. For the first time, they actually care about ideology. They actually care about principles and those kind of things. So now people are all energized over their beliefs instead of their ability to acquire things.
And I will go back to what you said in the very beginning. If people actually listened to what you had to say, as opposed to saying, liberal Jewish lawyer, Muslim woman, middle-aged, overweight white guy, I mean, and put
I'm with you now.
and put all of our labels on us as they were watching, and actually heard what you had to say about what's happening down at the border. When you're talking about, hey, hold on, there's a point here about we don't have just open borders, and we have the rule of law, and these are the things that need to be fixed, and they haven't been for a long time. Somebody who could look past the labels would always be, oh, wait a minute. Well, I actually agree with that, or maybe they would be harsher about it, or whatever the case may be. But there were things that you said that I think that many conservatives would have agreed with. That's what I mean about there could actually be. As I was listening to you, I said, my goodness, I mean, Congress, if they could get over themselves, could actually have a conversation where there could be some things where both sides could agree.
I've always been a Democrat, so it's not easy for me to say this, but you really do have to wonder, are we really ready for a new party, like an independent-oriented party? Has these
That was
two
going to
parties-
be my question. Do you still see this as going as a two-party system?
It's set up that way over the money, right? Because it takes so much money to run, and those people, the Democrats and Republicans, they line up the money for you. But you do have to ask yourself, do we really start to need to move away from the two-party system? Because it's given us great stability. But if it can't stop this deadlock between, like, I'm against you just because you have a label attached to you. If it can't stop this, how are we ever going to get to a solution? I'm hoping that somebody who's more in the middle somehow comes and wins in one of the two parties with the agenda that we're going to have to get along. We can't keep doing this. But if that doesn't happen, there has to be a new independent party that just says the two-party system's going to have to end. It's over.
I got so wrapped up in the conversation. We have just 30 seconds to get your perspective.
Well, thank you, Randy, for joining us. And I think Randy said it the best, that what we need in this country is conversation and understanding. Kind of goes with what our goal is with this show, is to give you different perspectives and to choose between what do you agree on, or parts of the conversation you agree on, not just necessarily black and white, yes or no to a topic. So thank you for watching Perspectives, and hope you can join us again.